Cool. I'm here with legendary Chicago DJ Vince Adams in the building. Pleasure to have you here, sir. Thank you for joining us on Crackle Jack.
There it is. I'm definitely ready to make it pop. Pun intended.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I like that. I like intentional puns. Yeah, we need
There
more
it
of
is.
those. Great, man. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Can you tell me about like what's your origin story as far as DJing goes? Was it some other part of music you were into, or was it strictly DJing that you were drawn to initially?
Origin story. It starts in the crib. I family said I always had a penchant for music, so just every year was a music related gift, a close and play. If anybody from the 60s or 70s can remember that, when you put the
Wow.
45 in it, close it
Uh-huh.
in and play it, or the little Panasonic, oval shaped recorders that you had to put up against the speaker in order to record something, all the way to the Sony boom boxes, or a drum set that I jumped in the middle of eventually at 3 4 years of age. It was just, I've always been drawn to music. And growing up in Chicago, there were basement parties, and back then that the kids could be downstairs for a second, and then it got to a point where the kids had to go upstairs. Well, there would be a point where I could play the music, and I really enjoyed just everything about music. So I wish I could play the piano. I wish I could play the guitars. I think my musicality is pretty decent, but it really just started out from being a fan of music and getting, the off the wall cassette. And, of course, we can go back to the 45s, and, going to Metro Music in Chicago and buying Rapper's Delight and all. That was probably the first record that I got myself, was Rapper's Delight in '79. But just fast forward to 1984, graduating from Whitney Young, eighth grade high school. I mean, eighth grade. Whitney Young High School has a seventh and eighth grade program. I graduated from eighth grade and 12th grade from Whitney Young. The reason for me sharing that is my graduation slash birthday gift. I wanted that to be two turntables and a mixer. So it kind of evolved from having an interest in music to saying, you know what, I actually want to be a DJ.
Right on. Yeah, I can remember those basement parties. My grandparents were the basement party throwers in my family in the basement on Roseland. And just like everybody's got that same story, like
Right.
me and my cousins could be down there for a minute, but then once the crowd started getting thick, it was like, all right, upstairs.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome, man.
And you
So now you just touched on it, because my next question, what was your first setup? It was it was an eighth grade graduation or high school graduation?
eighth grade. It was
Eighth
eighth
grade
grade graduation.
graduation. So
Yep.
what was the setup you got?
I can't remember whether it was Oriental Electronics in Chicago or Loop Electro. There was another, I think it was Loop Electronics as well as Loop Records, two separate places. But I think dragged my mom downtown, which she, already worked there, Whitney Young, and I'm like, we got to go into the store. And so there were B200 belt driven Techniques turntables, the B200, with the rotary pitch and all of those things. That anybody familiar with the early days of pitch controls, this was not quartz, meaning that it was not like, you could touch that joker and it could fly anywhere. You know how your parents tell you not to do things and you do it and then there's a consequence? Well, we lived in South Shore, and South Shore wasn't the worst place in the world at that point, but it had its gang elements and some other things at the time. And I put my system in the window because we just kind of like to play music. Well, they decided that they would liberate me of my turntables and records and everything. So at 16, I had to start over. So 2 years later, mom actually was nice enough to replace it. And I got the QX 200, which was still the straight arm techniques. But those were quartz driven, and they had slide pitches like the 1200s have the vertical pitch. The QX 200 had a horizontal little knob that you could move left and right. And that's how I learned how to mix. I went from the belt driven rotary pitch to the sliding pitch. And that was a Gemini mixer that I had with, actually, that was a Gemini mixer. And anybody that kind of like geeks out into stuff, I don't remember the model number, but that was actually a 4-channel Gemini, which in 86, you didn't see a lot of 4-channel mixers out there, but it actually was the one with dual faders. So it actually had 2 crossfaders on that Gemini.
Right, man. I was going to ask, did it even have a crossfader? It had the double.
Oh yeah, no, everything had, I didn't do the knobs, like turn the volume up on one. So everything was, levels. But that replacement mixer, which was the one that I took to college, that one actually was the 2 QX200s with the dual fader. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I the first turntables I DJ'd on didn't even match. One
And
had
that's a lot
pitch
of, it's
control,
like one realistic,
right, and one of them didn't
Right.
have any kind of pitch control. So it was
Right,
like,
right,
well, it was all slams on this one. Going to my
right,
left, it's all slams, and then maybe I could blend on the right.
right. Yeah.
I think you're all the better when you learn on like lesser equipment, because when you master it on lesser equipment, then when you get your 1200s, I know you were like, oh man, this is like DJing on a Benz, or you know what I mean? Like so much easier. Like, do you remember like your first official DJ gig?
Let's go to the first official gig. Yeah. That actually was in college. I'd been at Florida A&M University for about 3 weeks. And really, FAMU had a huge, I guess you could say, legacy of people from certain high schools. And I went to Whitney Young. So there were people that had graduated from my high school and went 1,000 miles away prior to me being there. So I knew some of the people, who were a little older than me. One of my buddies who graduated the year before, he had just pledged spring 88. And this is fall 88, my first semester, 3 weeks on the campus. And he's like, hey, some of my frat brothers are having a party at my dean's house. Why don't you come DJ it? I was like, no. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, Jeff, I brought, my turntables and records for a hobby, like just something to do in between classes, not like, I'm trying. And we have to remember, like back in the 80s, there were tons of basement DJs and bedroom DJs, and not everybody was trying to be the next LL Cool J if you could rap a little bit on the back of the school bus or the back of the CTA. Not everybody was trying to be a concert DJ like Jam Master Jay or Frankie Knuckles. Like, it was just a hobby for us, where I think everybody in 2000 wanted to be a rapper. Like, we didn't want to be DJs and rappers, and we just, may have had a hobby and we enjoyed it. So that's where it came from. I didn't get the equipment because, like, how can I be down or who's going to put me on? It was really just for my love of music. And when I said no, he was like, well, you have speakers and turntables and records, right? Why don't you do it? I was like, dude, I just don't want to. He was like, we'll pay you $50. I said, pick me up at 7. That was it. $50 in 1988 was, 10 haircuts, 10 pizzas, 10
right.
trips to KFC. Like, you could do a lot with $50 in 1988.
And for a hobby too. So $50 is like, okay, yeah. Now a little bit more about your time at FAMU now. So you from Chicago, you're spinning what you're familiar with here. House music is king, especially in the 80s. How was it like adapting to now you're down at FAMU and you got people from wherever, all over the country? Like, how was it trying to adapt to the different styles of music, or did you have to broaden the scope of the music you were playing like right away, or did you just kind of stick with your Chicago sound for a little while and then slowly branched out?
No, that's a great question. And here's why it's really so special to me is that was a really interesting time in music. Like, it was before Clear Channel. So a lot of people, Clear Channel is kind of like the umbrella of all black radio. And there may be a few outliers, but back then, if you listen to the radio in Baltimore, it didn't sound like the radio in Philly, didn't sound like the radio in New York, didn't sound like the radio in Cleveland, didn't sound like the radio in Tampa, didn't sound like the radio in San Francisco or the Bay. So radio really used to be very regional, where like if you were from Detroit, you listened to a certain sound. You were from Boston, you listened to a different sound. You were from Philly, it was different than what was happening in Boston. I share that to say that we had a radio station called WHPK, which was the University of Chicago College radio station, and they had a hip hop show that played everything from across the country. So they were playing MC Breeze, Discombobulator Boobulator out of Philly. They were playing PSK, Schoolie D out of Philly. They were playing Ice-T out of California, and Joe Cooley. They were playing Luke out of Florida. So literally, we used to listen to HPK tapes at lunchtime, but the dance music in Chicago or the party music was house music. But during that time, especially if you lived around Hyde Park, WHPK was like you could kind of get a taste of Kiss FM out of New York and K-Mail out of the Bay. Like you actually got all of these different flavors. So I say that to say when I went to FAM, I already had a wide palette of interests, and I was buying these records, not knowing that this Heavy D record or that this Luke, and this is before Banned in the USA. This is like, hey, this
first,
is that Luke.
Yeah, the first Two Live Crew.
Right, move something.
Yeah.
Right. The Two Live Crew, absolutely. So I share that to say that it was real easy for me, but in Florida, what you had was you had the DJs from the South who hated the music from the North. And you had the DJs from the North who were like, we don't like that music from the South. I liked everything. And because blending was kind of like my, foundation, I was able to put house music with bass music, or I was able to put R&B with hip hop. And the girls would say, yo, we like going to Vince's party because we're going to hear some of everything. Where if you went to a Florida party, you were not going to hear any house music. Definitely. You were probably not going to hear much hip hop or anything like that because everything was so segmented. I was one of the first DJs in Northern Florida to play a variety of music where regardless of what geographic region you were from, you were going to hear something. And that's how I shot so fast, because I really embraced it. But HBK was the foundation of that, because HBK played everything hip hop wise across the country. And between that and the staples of, like a Keith Sweat and the things that you would hear on the radio, I pretty much had a lot of those things in my catalog already.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and it almost matches up like with the geography of the country, how Chicago's like in the middle.
Right.
How we're like this hub of the South, the West Coast, and the East Coast. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Because even coming up, you could always find people who were into any kind of music, whether it was the Miami bass or all West Coast stuff, or all East Coast stuff, was where I gravitated towards. And yeah, you're right. Chicago is always been kind of like a melting pot when it came to different sounds and styles.
1996, my frat brother, high school classmate, and college classmate, Teddy Gilmore, starts ClubNet. He gives me a call and he's like, hey, I want you to be the vice president of music operations. And it's like deja vu. It's just like 8 years ago. Like, I don't have to DJ, right? I'm just helping you select DJs and do different things that you're doing musically.
Okay.
And he was like, no, you don't have to DJ. I just want you to help me with the music aspects of ClubNet. And ClubNet was Google before Google. So let me just share super quickly, just to kind of put this in perspective for people. There is no internet at this point. We have to remember there is no internet. So ClubNet was originally a system, a telephone system, where if you call in a ClubNet, it's welcome to ClubNet. For information on restaurants, press 1. For information on, city events, press 2. So ClubNet was a phone network for people to learn about things. So he bought a very expensive system that was phone operated, where you hit a number and it goes out. And he actually started Teddy being he started the parties to promote the ClubNet system, and the company or the parties.
So
got
there
bigger.
really was I just
there
know
was a
ClubNet
ClubNet
as like,
system.
hey, there's a ClubNet party.
The
That's
parties got bigger than than the
but
system.
I okay.
So
Wow.
so I was helping him create the music beds and the different things that when you
Hmm.
call into the phone, and then I started helping them book the DJs. So you got people like Steve Maestro or Ferris Thomas, DJ Phantom. Like, hey, can we get them? Like, sure, let's put this guy on this one, and then he buys turntables for the office in order for me to create the music beds. So we've got an office on Superior. I'm DJing in the office oftentimes, just kind of playing around. And people walk into the office like, man, what's that tape? Because remember, we couldn't even record CDs at this point. And they're like, that's Vince in there playing. He's like, that's Vince? Like, yeah, he used to DJ all of our parties. Like, he DJs like that? He's like, yeah. And so many people started saying that, just kind of coming in. He was like, dude, you need to get back into it. And I was like, no, I don't. And he was like, yes, you do. And I'm going to put you on it was the exact same thing as 8 years prior, but he was like, I'm going to
Wow,
put you
man.
on the Union Station party. And the Union Station party had 1,500 people in it, and I DJ'd the entire thing. So that was my foray or my return back in
Wow, what a
1996.
return, dude,
Yeah.
because those club net parties were like it was just it was just like next level because like we had been going to the Hot House and the Alcatraz and the Convent and all of those places. And Teddy Gilmore and yourself, when you guys started doing these, and like Union Station, all these big venues like this.
Yeah, Union
I
Station,
remember you guys
Navy
had like
Pier,
something Marshall Fields.
State of Illinois building, seventh floor,
Right,
Marshall Fields. Yeah.
right, right. It was definitely next level. That is very interesting. We're going to school
Okay.
here
So yeah,
tonight.
so shout out to my brother Dave Boone. Dave was an avid record collector, and double copies were big back then. Remember, this is pre Serato, pre CDs. So he's like, "Hey, I've got the 12 inch of Baby I'm Scared of You, and I've got the album version. Like, you take that one to this party, I'll take this one to that party." And so Dave actually was the foundation for me to build. But then my name and reputation built so fast, it got to the point that all of the record pools around the city were like, hey, we need to make sure he has this. We need, like, I got 7 copies of a Ja Rule record, 8 copies of a Jay-Z. Like, I can't, like, it got pretty nuts. So the vinyl, like, built super fast. And, the ability to go back and get, white labels. I would go to New York sometime and, get things that otherwise were out of print, but get the white labels. And, so I was able to build the record collection back super fast. And, from 88 and prior to that, and even moving fast. So yeah, the vinyl became, because we have to remember in the essence of the show, at that time, if you didn't have the record, you couldn't play it at the party. It's not like download this and this is on my phone and go. It was, if you didn't have a record,
With no tape deck because you got it on. None of that.
right.
None of
If you
that.
didn't have a
Yeah,
record,
man.
nobody could hear it. So but
Yeah.
that changed super quick between '96 and 2000.
How was your transition from all of that vinyl going into like more of the digital world? What was the first digital medium you use, and how long did it take to convince you to stop using records? Maybe.
Took one party, Fat Mike at the Buzz. Fat Mike comes in with this big coffin and everything and sets it up on top of where the turntables was and kills a party with one bag of CDs. If you're on the dance floor, you can't hear if he's scratching, or it's just undetectable to the right. Like, they have no idea. So here's where you start to battle with the purity of going digital. Like, people like, hey, that's not real, and this is like, I was like, let me get this right. For every song that I have one copy of, I've got 2. Instead of taking 7 crates from Cherry Red, prior to Cherry Red, Sugar Hill, which was one of the biggest parties. Like, Sugar Hill was a party that ClubNet, Teddy Gilmore, created with 7 different radio personalities from WGCI, which is the biggest radio station in the Midwest. 7. He had 7 different hosts from the same radio. That just was a lockdown. But I would go from there over to E2.
Mhm.
So instead of taking, 7 crates of records, you just take a coffin and a backpack, or, that changed the game. So watching Fat Mike, that one party, that was it. I immediately went and
So you're
converted
like,
everything that wasn't on MP3. I burned every song from wax onto onto a computer, and then moved those songs onto individual discs. For some people, vinyl is a tactile experience. The actual feel of the wax and the control that they feel that they have. Even Ferris Thomas, who is, for anybody who's not watching, DJ legend, super big name in Chicago, Ferris went to the Techniques CDJs or the Techniques CD players when we went to the Pioneers, because he liked the fact that they spun and they weighed 1,000,000 pounds, and you have to bring those in and out of the club. But still, some people like the actual revolution, which is why the Rain decks, have created like, I think Jazzy Jeff primarily spends with the Rain decks now. So that dynamic, the tactile feel and the rotation of the wax, for some people is a huge benefit, because it just takes them back to their foundation of DJing on wax. So, for that reason, and emotionally, and, how you connect with things, in a, like I said, a physical, tactile sense, for some people, that would be a benefit.
Well, speaking of what's next, what's next for DJ Vince Adams? I know it's been tough with this pandemic. We're still kind of like fighting, but what's coming up?
What's been up for the last year and a half for me is virtual. I just, again, and being an early adopter, shouts out to my guy D Nice. A lot of people call me that day when he hit over 100,000 people, right as soon in March as COVID hit and we were on shutdown and airports were congested and all of that. People were calling me like, "Are you watching D Nice?" I was like, "No, I'm watching TV or whatever." And the phone just got to the point where I was like, "I've got to see what's happening here." And it was a moment. It was definitely, an incredible thing that took place. But if you weren't Janet Jackson or Michelle Obama, you were not going to be recognized in that party. So I was like, what if I could kind of like make a little switch on this that makes it kind of like when I see my guy Emilio, when I see, my guy T Nick, when I see different people in the party, they get recognized across the world. So I've actually been able to parlay an in-person experience over to the virtual world, and it's treating me well. I'm still there. Calendar is filling up for 2023 virtual events, where we got to understand, like, this is an interview that we would have more so in 2018, 19 tried to schedule as a face-to-face as the default.
Yeah.
Now the default is Zoom. So there are going to be certain instances, for certain types of events where, I just did something for the Association of Black Cardiologists. So you've got very important people from across the country, some in Atlanta, some in New York, some in San Francisco. Like, do they really want to kind of like all descend on the same city and get hotels and clear their schedules? Or can they do a Saturday night from the comfort of their living room or their basement or, their family room for a virtual event, 2-3 hours, they're done. They didn't have to go anywhere. So there won't necessarily be applications as we, move past COVID that everybody's doing virtual. Of course, people want the physical fellowship, but there will be some practical instances where it's like, hey, this just makes sense for us to be dispersed, but at the same time, still get together. And that's, the magic of what's next for me is just having fun in the virtual world. So if I can leave, on kind of like a note to grow on, like anybody, if you ever want to DJ, respect, 4/4 time, respect, 8 bars, 16 bars, 32s. There are no 10s, there are no 6, there are no 18s.
Don't walk out. Well, yeah, let's put that at 1/18th. Like what?
Right. Yeah, it's like it's on beat, but it's on the wrong beat. Like
beat.
So
yeah, so, because then there's that. Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thank
So,
you
so you
again.
know, definitely that's the the where everything started in 1984. It was respecting that, and it's just all been building off that building block.
Thank you for all that you've given to especially Chicago. You know what I
Thank you
mean?
so
Like
much.
your reach is beyond Chicago, but on behalf of everybody, man, and this is part of what we're doing here is like I want to hand out flowers while people can receive them actually.
I
You know what I
appreciate
mean?
that.
All
Much love
right,
to you and
DJ.
your community.
Yes, sir.
You got it.
All right, DJ Vince Adams. Thank you again, sir.